Yeah, welcome to all survivors here, as you mentioned. Cool. Yeah, let's do a quick round, 10 seconds of what you guys build and why so excited. This is the last panel. I will try to be more spicy than before. Everybody knows zkSync, right? But please, Marco, take it away.
I have to give him the microphone. So everyone, I'm Marco. I'm from zkSync. zkSync is a layer 2 scaling solution. What we do is we take big batches of transactions, move them off chain, prove them with zero-knowledge proof, validity proof, send them back the proof, and the new final delta state on chain. And this creates a high degree of scale. We are also the builder of zkStack, which is a general purpose technology that allows anybody to create modular sovereign chain, and zkSync Cora, which is the first instantiation of zkStack.
Hello everyone, my name is Sandy from Scroll, and we're building a native zk EM trying to bring the most seamless developer experience on chain.
Hello everyone, my name is Kevin. I'm the co-founder and also the CEO of zkEM. To be honest, I feel like I was placed to the wrong panel because I'm not zkEM, but we are a general zk. Okay, just kidding. We're general purpose zkVM. We hope to provide verifiable computation, no matter this computation comes from blockchain nodes or non-blockchain use cases. That's pretty much what we're doing.
Hey everyone, my name is David. I'm head of DevRel Taiko. So we are building a zk EVM, a type 1 zk EVM, but it seems like type 1's sort of going out of style. There's like type 0 now as well, I guess. So yeah, we're like rethinking that. Yeah, I'm just really excited to be here in Korea with all of you and to learn from you guys on the panel. And yeah, thanks.
Hi everyone, this is Vince from zk.Link. So we're not at the wrong place. We're not building zk EVM either. So we're actually building on top of the zk EVMs here. We're building a unified trading execution layer across different zk EVMs and zk VMs, trying to unite the Ethereum layer 2 ecosystem by unifying liquidity and simplifying the complexity and the user experience on top of these zk EVMs. Cool, so we will find some questions for you guys too. But thinking about like this journey has been evolved, right? What were the obstacles and challenges that we had during the past, maybe 2-3 years that you saw on a user adoption level? And then, I will move to the developer side later.
Shall I go again first? So, I mean, in general, Ethereum saw a lot of challenges. So Ethereum is a supply-constrained system where every time you have anything that is some form of product market fit, fees usually more than compensate the product market fit. So you have this oscillatory nature of something is interesting, usage goes up, fee spike is not interesting anymore, goes down. And so it was difficult to, in general, for the ecosystem to find product market fit. And hence where some of us, what we are trying to do, bringing scale to the system is one big solution to at least one of these problems. The second, I think, is in general UX. UX on chain is not great. So in this room, probably everybody is a little bit of a geek, so kind of all like to deal with the private keys and ledgers and all of these things. But 99.999% of the population doesn't. And so what we need to do is we need to figure out ways to abstract all of this stuff away. Majority of users will not want to see it. And then the third, it was touched upon in the previous panel, is like real practical decentralization, real practical credible neutrality. It's not just something that all of us are saying all the time, especially on stages, because it sounds very cool. But there is a very good reason, I think, why credible neutrality is very important, and is that if we hope for large users to come on chain, they will demand this credible neutrality. I saw a presentation in Paris from our friends at Tali, and I think Denison explained it clearly with an example. He was giving the example of Zynga and Facebook. So you're there building your own great product, it has product market fit, it's worth $1 billion. Facebook launches Facebook game and you will close down. And that means that there wasn't credible neutrality. So we all have to figure it out, and it comes with decentralization and with a bunch of other things.
So I think there are a whole ton of challenges when you go from a research concept to a product. And especially when you're trying to build a product that's been in existence for 8 years already. Developers have entrenched user habits, and there's also a very large group of users with relatively entrenched user habits. So as Marco was alluding to, the current UX for crypto is terrible, having to remember passcode and having to bridge between various L1s and increasingly L2s. An average user cannot be expected to go through so much hoop in order to get to an average dApp, which is the Web3 equivalent of a website. But with this entrenched user behavior and huge because Ethereum is the value layer of the internet, so with huge incentives for these users and developers to kind of jump through hoops in order to do certain things, and having done it for 8 years, there's constantly a balance between trying to cater towards the existing set of users versus the new set of users that's coming in. So on one hand, the existing set of developers are incredibly demanding, and they're used to certain ways that they've kind of just grown used to. And on the other hand, we, as an infra kind of provider, we also need to kind of build with the future in mind and think about how we can get to a stage collectively as an industry where people don't really need to think about gas cost, or don't really need to think about kind of bridging. These are innately crypto concepts that just shouldn't even exist.
So we're talking from the user perspective, right? For zkVM, the users we define are actually business, like different layer 2s, layer 1s, and non-blocking use cases. So as a general purpose one, you're gonna face some, if you are building too general, you might not fit for every use case. So that's one of the biggest challenges we are facing, that we still need to define, because this is still at a very early stage, we still need to define some specific use cases so that we can have different kind of optimization for these layer 2s, layer 1s to get on board. And also for the non-blocking use cases, as we mentioned, like IoT devices or cloud computing, actually the education cost is pretty high. You still need to convince them that there's a zk solution and you can use it, you can benefit from that. I would say education, that's still a big challenge for now.
Yeah, I agree with what the other speakers have said, especially the part of, from the user perspective, that using all of these different rollups is quite confusing. And we just realized this recently on our testnet as well, because I think all of the rollups are eventually going to have like multiple instances of their rollup and not just one. And from like a documentation perspective and from a user perspective, like if they're trying to connect to like, let's say L2A or L2B, L2C, like different versions of the network, it gets a little bit confusing on like which one is the network. So I think in the same way that we've had abstractions built like for accounts, like account abstraction, we need some things like chain abstraction, where everything starts to look more like a single chain from the user's perspective, instead of like all of these different instances. So I think that's kind of the biggest challenge that users face. And one thing that I think about a lot is if you look at how people navigate the web today, they just use like a web browser. They'll go to a web browser and the browser will verify if it's HTTPS, if it's like a valid encrypted connection. And I think wallets are starting to do the same thing too. They're looking if there's like any kind of security vulnerabilities for contracts you interact with. And I think there might even be some sense of auditing for chains that are being used. Like, oh, is this a trusted RPC? Is this one of Taiko's chains, Scroll chains, like zkSync chains? And then the user doesn't need to think about like, oh, switching to this, approve that one. It just, the browser or the wallet can check and make sure that things look good for the user, and we can kind of like build out these simpler abstractions. So yeah.
Thank you, David. We'll absolutely build a solution like what you just mentioned. Yeah, we will be abstracting the underlying rollups, zk EVMs, zkVMs, or even other layer 1 chains So users wouldn't have to worry about which things they're connecting to, but they just need to focus on user experience of the product one stop. No need to worry about the underlying chains and the rollups. From a developer's perspective, I think that currently we're facing a problem of maturity of the layer 2s because we are eagerly waiting as well, right? So as a team who's actively building on top of different layer 2s, we hope that we could have better level of maturity in terms of developer toolings, the programming language, also the prover system, the libraries that we can use on top of different ecosystems. Well, I think that is the implementation speed that we wanted it to be. It's actually slower than how we wished it could be. That's the challenge of today.
Yeah, you touched on developer tooling. But with David, like what you mentioned, like basically Metamask Snaps is trying to push that boundary, right? Like trying to build this kind of like extension on top and be that like this layer. I think it's really cool. But on the developer side, like I mean, I would play a little bit the devil advocate here. We're coming off from 72 hours of like hackathon, and a bunch of people are probably deploying their dApps. A bunch of people. I mean, maybe this is something with Foundry or Truffle. But I feel like there is not enough, like maybe fundamentals there, like on sometimes bridging is taking longer, so we need to send test tokens to developers. Faucets are, I don't know, like sometimes they're empty, they're not working. Like, what are the developer tooling like that are going around those layer 2s? Are we there yet? I don't think so. But what are the things that we need to solve to get at least a minimum viable developer onboarding? In each of your ecosystem?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. So I think that we need a little bit more just like unification of some of these tools and that people use. So maybe maybe we can start like putting things in like one place, maybe more on like Ethereum org documentation or other sites, so people don't have to use like a specific faucet or a specific thing. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting is if we can try to do less in terms of like our responsibility. So at Taiko, like we do have a bridge, but we kind of consider this as just one implementation of our bridge that's built onto the core protocol. So trying to focus on like the things that we're trying to do, which is scale Ethereum, and maybe let other companies or other people kind of like start up and create these really robust bridging solutions, cross-chain messaging solutions. And then it might be easier for users because they don't have to like go to like this bridge and that bridge and all these other ones. Like there are other companies focused on that exact initiative.
I agree. Actually, community needs to play a very important role in this tooling part. Especially, I believe all projects can be open source, so that's must have. On the other side, I'm thinking like for zk VM, since it's a general purpose, and we are utilizing MIPS architecture, so we will need different kind of compilers to compile, Go, Rust, or C to MIPS. So this kind of a compiler is something I think for a lot of zkVM projects they're in need of. So that's kind of a tool.
So I think tooling as a particular subset and business model that exists in the Ethereum ecosystem are not something that needs to choose. Certain projects require liquidity, or they require like more concentration of force and applying leverage within a certain ecosystem, but that problem doesn't exist for tooling. And that's one of the beauties of layer 2 and specifically ones that are EVM compatible or EVM equivalent, is that we get to inherit a lot of the tooling that have been built in Ethereum over the last 8 years. And also another thing that we're really lucky to be able to inherit is just a lot of the public goods culture that bred a lot of the smaller tools that might just come in useful.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that has been said so far. I think we need to encourage more activity from our communities. We need to encourage more creation of public goods. We need to be much more open to accept suggestions and changes that are suggested by our community. I think all these things will help very much. And then, building in an environment, as Sandy said, an environment like Ethereum, you inherit a lot of these things that are coming out of the box. In our case, because we are trying to build a general stack that allows the creation of multiple chains, in particular, one tooling set that is not that available, although there are other teams that are building similar things, is going to be the inter-chain connectivity that we think is very, very important. We call it hyper bridges, is about to be ready, and we think one of these things is going to be very, it's going to be very, very useful for people to explore and interesting ways.
For the connectivity, do you consider like a solution like zk.Link to be, something that could work for the community, like as a middleware layer that can unify, to simplify the communication, but it's only for certain types of application. It's not for every type of application. So this there's a choice over there. So this is something that we always want to know how we can more closely collaborate with the zk EVM and zk EVM ecosystems. That's it's important for us to find out our positioning in these different ecosystems.
And at least in our case, whenever we build something, we try to build it super generic and very basic. With really the intent of other partners to come on board to take some or none or all of it and then improve and use it and build their own more powerful, more specialized set of tooling. We did the same with account abstraction. For example, we have Paymaster. We've been having it for a long time, but we didn't build any specific Paymaster. So this is a general framework that people can use. We didn't want to have our own version of it. And the same is going to be true for, say, a bridge. We're going to build a general messaging system, and then if people want to use this to build a bridge that doesn't require liquidity, that's great. If they want to use it to build other stuff, that's great. If they want to use it and build their own, even better, because probably it's going to be cool and they're going to learn something from that.
Do you see any specific vertical, like gaming, adopting a specific type of rollups? I don't know, lately I see only game deploying on optimistic. I see a lot of a use case on zkSync, right? Obviously native now, right? But is there any specific wave of innovation or type of vertical that you see happening in your specific layers, or is something general?
I'm happy to start. From our point of view, so all the layers are slightly different from each other, and that's very cool because we are going to see which one set of trade-off. Because at the end of the day, there is no one that I think is fundamentally better at everything than everyone else. We are all choosing a different set of trade-off, and it's going to be what developer needs more, what user needs more. So one specific example, zkSync is unique in that we have on-chain state differences rather than full state changes. We're not unique, Starcore does it as well. But all the other rollup instead choose to have all the state changes. And this, like everything else, is a trade-off. It's good for something and is bad for something else. In our case, we think it's very good because it creates a compression in the cold data that is big or small depending on the type of transaction. But for specific type of transaction, like Oracle update, is gigantic. If you have an Oracle update, which is just a change of a storage slot, if you can do it at least once during a block, in zkSync, then you can do it as many times as you want within the same block. If you have fast Oracle, this means that the risk model for a market maker will allow them to have tighter bid offer. With tighter bid offer, you have lower slippage. With lower slippage, me and you using that X will have a better trading environment without any extra risk, without any liquidity mining, without any fancy tokenomics. It's just going to happen because the system is fundamentally more efficient for this specific use case. The same is true for anything that has to do with liquidations and is connected to the same thing. If you have an Oracle and this Oracle update faster, then your over-collateralization can go down because the risk that you're hedging is the fact that the collateral goes below the level of the asset before someone can liquidate it, and someone can liquidate it when the Oracle updates. And so if today there's an asset that liquidates, if the Oracle is 5 minutes, it goes down to 1 second, you have 300 times less time, volatility grows with the square root of time, so square root of 300 is 17, so you have 17 times less risk. And that's kind of cool, hopefully. And also connected to the same, maybe it's connected to more gaming or identity. Another way to say what I just said, so rather than talking about state changes versus state differences, you can talk about state input versus state output. So what we have on chain is the output of the system and not all the inputs. And kind of like one of the reasons why zk scale is the succinct property of zero knowledge is the fact that you can represent any arbitrary large input with a small output. And so output are always, in our opinion, are always better to be on chain. So if you deal with your application with privacy, so if you are an ID, an identity, digital identity-based system, if you have a fog of war in a game, if you are a poker game, if you have anything where the full state of the system shouldn't be available when people are interacting with the system, then verifying these proofs will be fundamentally cheaper in a system that have state output rather than state input. And of course, this creates also problems around auditability, around a bunch of other stuff. So we love to see what user will come and use and prefer.
So I think being a permissionless project with fraud proofs and currently on testnet, I think certain type of applications that have existed on Ethereum prior just makes more sense. Obviously, we're not gating, and statistically, I think I have some interesting statistics to share about the type of project that can be found on Scroll. Is that over the last, since we launched Sepolia testnet, which was I believe a few months ago, we have about 60,000 different smart, not different, but just smart contracts deployed, and I think a sizable portion of them are DeFi projects, and a sizable portion are NFT projects. The slightly unexpected findings is that there are a lot of privacy-related kind of applications as well as identity-related applications. I believe some of the previous speakers were alluding to that a layer 2 needs to make a trade-off and make decisions on security versus scalability to some extent, because if you compromise security levels, then there's a gradual scale to which you can meet the user demand at a low gas fee level. But I think very early on in Scroll's development process, we've made the technical decision to prioritize security, and then that determines a certain set of applications, the ones that require value, that has high value throughput. These type of applications tend to navigate towards protocols that have prop proofs and tend to be a little bit that have mathematical kind of better kind of security guarantees. And then the last part that is somewhat unexpected in terms of kind of ecosystem development finding is that because I think partially because we're a large contributor to the Halo 2 public library, a lot of projects that are using Halo 2 for other implementations of different dApps tend to build on Scroll. They're obviously also interoperable with any other zk or non-zk type of just EVM equivalent products. But because we're a contributor to the library and we can explain how some of this stuff are put together and design decisions, they tend to be somewhat closer to our ecosystem. But I think we're still early on in the discovery process, and a lot of this is impacted by the fact that we're not on mainnet yet. But I expect these things will change a little bit, and I think it is quite likely that the tendency towards more meaningful transactions will persist because of this decision to for us to move towards a more security-first design principles.
I mean, you touch on security, super cool, right? But in terms of, how you can scale and at the same time, improve and maintain our robust security, right? But that is a trade-off. So yeah, this is a kind of a question to everybody, right? How we can improve scalability at the same time have a robust security, especially for mainnet.
I think it's constantly a trade-off, but the scalability play is also a 3 to 5 year, maybe a 10-year journey. And it's about, in this process, do you compromise security first and reach a point of kind of low fees in order to gain user adoption, or do you prioritize security first? I think with a lot of parallel developments, such as kind of hardware proving improvements and also blah blah blah, like dank sharding, etc. There's a lot of stuff that will continue scaling over the next 10 years, but it's about kind of the early formats of your community and how do you curate the type of interest.
Yeah, and I think a misconception around here is a lot that people think about rollups, hey, those are for scaling. A lot of time you have zk focus on privacy, right? So I think it's a mix of the two, right? Yeah, anything to add?
I want to answer this question and the last question altogether, because I'm seeing a very interesting innovation going on with the zkVM side. Because like for all the current optimistic rollup, actually they can build on this zkVM and to be upgrade to hybrid, which means they can have double layer of security. When currently there's a big drawback for optimistic rollup is that you will need to wait for 7 days to withdraw fund from layer 2 to layer 1. But if you submit these withdrawal transactions into this zkVM, we can provide the proof instantly. So the layer 1 smart contract can get the new state, verify, and release the fund instantly. But if there's something happen during the process, let's say sequencer is doing something bad, or prover is not working or something like that, the proof will not be generated. So there will be another state verified by the layer 1 smart contract and telling the system, hey, you can go back to your traditional 7 days for a proof window. So it's kind of a combination of the best part from both worlds, but it also enhance the security. So that's the use case actually we hope to support. And,
Yeah, I really agree with what you were saying about that, because I think in the future we're all going to have these multi-proof systems that have higher levels of security, and in some sense users can kind of select where they want to be on this security curve. And one way that this happens on L1 is just simply waiting for like how finalized your block is, right? Because finality is like a sense of like how long it's been and how difficult it would be to fork. And I think in the same sense, you could be optimistic about something and decide not to wait for like a full ZKP for something, or you can decide to wait for one ZKP, or you can decide to wait for like a full like multi-proof with like, everything combined. So I think letting users select, or I guess app developers or any kind of developers select what amount they want is something that's going to be useful too. And to answer the previous question as well, like new kinds of things that we're seeing in the ecosystem, I would say that it's very similar to what we have like on Ethereum L1. We don't see like a huge divergence, but I do see all of this like new like general zk technology maybe being very helpful for scaling. And I'd love to see like some more numbers around this to some degree, where like we know 4844 and is going to like reduce the cost a lot. I wonder how much cost reduction we can also get by this like kind of, we know that ZKPs are really good for batching a lot of things that happen and putting that into a small proof. Now that we have these things unlocking a little bit more for like general computation, I wonder how much more throughput we can get, because a lot of products have always like not really been able to be successful because let's say you're making some like gaming dApp, you have to do a bunch of on-chain transactions. It's very expensive to continue to call the L1. If we can start batching a lot of these operations, providing a ZKP that they were done correctly, and on top of 4844, I think we get like a lot more scale. So I think applications that rely on making a lot of on-chain calls can get this like double benefit of like trying to use ZKPs more and then also 4844. So
I think we have to talk to specific types of builders that we have been carefully studying their needs and trying to understand deeper what do they need when they consider stability and security, what the trade-offs would make sense for their specific types of applications. Our focus currently, we're focusing on central limit order books. We have talked to different teams that have extensive experience with financial products, financial engineering, and then relatively lack of experience with on-chain technology, with ZKP, with smart contracts. And most of the time, I think what they really need is low cost per transaction, then high throughput, at the same time self-custodial, and somehow validity proof is really great for them to prove that the funds are safe and self-custodial and managed by the users themselves. This is also why we have chosen this use case as a first focused production or application to support. And also you mentioned that there are multi-layers right now, right? So on layer 2, we're building layer 3, and there's a play that where you put your DA, right? So you actually have different level of security. You have the internal DA. You put the DA on Ethereum, DA on zkSync, on Scroll. They are different, right? Slightly different. And there are also external DAs where you put DA on eigenlayer, Celestia, or even some other outer layer ones. I think this is a business decision when it comes down to the founders of the applications, how well they understand the needs of their end users, right? It's not there. It couldn't at least. There's a trade-off, right? It could be like as secure as Ethereum and then scale to 100 times or 1,000 times. So what we offer is like we decompose these needs. We customize each of these components for different types of different builders, different DEX founders. When they want to have like, let's say I want to 1,000 times cheaper cost per transaction, we want to run 1,000 TPS. Right now, we don't want to wait. Right now, we want 1,000 TPS. We want 0.001 US dollar per transaction. How we achieve that? And we tell them, okay, now you have the option to settle the transactions on layer 2s. Although the layer 2 is not user ready yet, right? So there are some components not fully user ready yet. So the second third is not decentralized, and the settlement, the finality is still slow. So this is the trade-off we're making today. That is why we're eagerly waiting for the layer 2s to become more mature. And we believe that we'll get there. Just needs more time. And it's just an implementation engineering problem. And in terms of the security for the DA to restore permissionlessly the layer 2 status, to exit bonds permissionlessly, which is extremely important for DeFi applications when you have a large amount of funds to handle on applications. And I think that all these builders, application builder founders, they really care about this. And they often have to make the choice between Ethereum and external DA. And they're some of them having a hard time making the decision. I think the infrastructures will be able to provide better options to them as time goes.
Add something? Yeah. Before I founded this zkM, I'm also the co-founder of Metis, Ethereum layer 2 scaling solution in OpenStack. I can share one of our practice. Actually, when you check the L2 fees, you're gonna find the transaction fee on Metis is only 1 cent for make the transaction. The practice we're doing is actually we upload the transaction data to off-chain storage, decentralized distributed storage, and then store that hash key back to layer 1. So in this way, you can save a lot of data, space. But of course, as everyone mentioned, there is always a trade-off, like the security and the cost. So, but I hope to provide an example that if you're doing this way, actually you can have a much cheaper price. But of course, when you turn to IP 48, 44, we still don't know how much lower the price can be. Just
100%.
Maybe can I also add one point on security? I think it also comes to being a little bit smarter on what goes on chain. So, for example, in a Validium system where you can have at the same time zk rollup and something with another data availability, it would be very interesting to think about what goes where. So for example, things like Oracle updates, which use a lot of space potentially, they can easily go on the external data availability layer, even with very, very limited security. Because really, who cares? If someone were to freeze the data availability with all the data, then you can just redeploy, because anyway, there's no history that must be saved, there's no balance of the Oracle that is important to anybody, it's actually observable. If I have my money instead in that place and someone freezes it, then I'm upset. So if you started to shift where you put your security and you have differentiated security versus cost portion of the infrastructure, we can be a little bit more conscious where the stuff goes. That will help a lot to release a little bit this trade-off between security and scale.
Yeah, I think we spoke a lot about trade-offs. I think also it's not just a technical how do you say, chicken egg problem like solving thing, right? It's also about how we solve ecosystem growth, how we build like an easier onboarding for developers. If not, I think also like in these ecosystems of layers, like it depends also how strong is your support in terms of like how healthy is your partner ecosystem around your layers, right? And I'm excited about a lot of like this multi-prover future, this kind of like discussion happening. But I'm also conscious that if we're not creating a good onboarding and education flow for developers, just go to an hackathon and you see how even like easier things like deploying and then creating an RPC like provider needs for your layer is also difficult. Faucets something are not even like dropping. Bridges are sometimes not working, even if you create a bounty specific for that. And until we solve this kind of like previous needs, it's also difficult to get adoption on the other side. But I think we're almost on time. Let's have some questions from the audience, and if not, we'll continue to speak. I think you're really survivors. Yeah, go for it.
As you just mentioned, developer onboarding side. So, what is your plan currently for future products or like current ones? How you gonna support developers to building something on your protocol, or like even what kind of feature you're also looking into? They utilize this.
Yeah, I can take that one. So, like, one thing that we try to leverage a lot at Taiko is our community Discord, and we try to like just be really close with the people who are building on our platform, and to do our best to like educate them and let them be a part of like events that we have going on. So I think just like having that support community is really important, to be able to like walk their hand through doing certain things, like running a node, deploying contracts, and even just educating them on more technical concepts so that they can start to do some really advanced things. Like, we try to drop a lot of alpha inside of our like Discord talks, because we see our community as like the first people that can like start to build maybe some new ideas, new protocols for the interesting ideas that we need. Like, I won't go too deep into it, but like we need some more research on like PBS infrastructure. So we try to share that with our community so they can start building it. And then we try to also, just do the best education we can. We actually have a ZK workshop coming up with Encode Club as well. We try to do things like that so that people can get more educated and become bigger players within our community.
On the linear side, I can speak about how strong is the like kind of this ecosystem partner, leverage partners, getting feedback as soon as possible. I think this is helping a lot. And then also like obviously community initiative, where you're speaking like having like not like just beginners building like ambassador programs, but more like advanced, that you feature like betas, and that you get also like specific contribution being built through like grants and quests coming from product teams. Like there is huge needs on optimizing documentation, like big needs on like creating toolings around not just deploying your devs on your layer tools. And I think it's a big thing, these two, right? Leveraging community, creating like specific initiatives with grants and ambassador programs, more advanced, and then leveraging like early partners. Even if partners are deploying on different layers, you can leverage also their experience instead of actually like trying to beta test your own features that already.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe just a word on this. So first of all, I want to thank the community, so that they took we are humbled by the results, and zkSync has been taken very positively by the community. It's very good that, zk Rollup now do more transactions than all the optimistic Rollup combined. We alone do more transactions than Arbitrum and Optimism combined, almost, over the past 30 days. So in general, that's strong. The number of active addresses is very high. We have more than Arbitrum and Optimism combined, and a bunch of others too. So that shows that zk is being adopted. People like it, developers like it. But also, it was said also in the panel before, it's slightly more complicated. Not everything works out of the box. There's a bunch of complexity that need to be solved. So I think we touched education, we touched building up the community more and making sure that there's a group of people that really strongly believe in this and continues to build. Personally, and I don't have an answer, but I have a question, and the question is we need to figure out how to incentivize the emergent nature of the system. So one thing we are bringing with zk is we are expanding a little bit the developer real estate. And so they can do more. No, they can do more because with a factor of magnitude more scale, you can build more stuff. But also because all of us enable a little bit more thing to be built. A custom zkVM enable a lot more stuff to come on chain. In general, zkVM, they enable more things to be built. And I think figuring out how to incentivize this new stuff that we don't know, being built, is really going to be the future. Because otherwise, we're going to get more of the same, slightly more efficient. And I don't think we're going to scale to 1 billion people, not just with this.
So I think from our perspective, developer engagement starts from a product level first and foremost. And the first part is reducing onboarding friction, whatever that means. So just automating the entire kind of ecosystem engagement process and taking kind of the human touch points out of it as much as possible. The second part that our philosophy when we come to ecosystem building and developer onboarding is credible neutrality. And that framework kind of somewhat prohibits us from reaching out and doing too much with the community, but on the other hand, that allows us to focus on efforts on initiatives that lifts the entire ecosystem up unilaterally. And I think the inherent promise to builders choosing to build on Scroll is that we are providing a level playing field, and we are providing the public goods that kind of supports equally. So rather than having to be friends and speak to anyone on a team, we have the mechanism kind of provided to make sure this system is fair and transparent and everyone can succeed.
We ultimately want to empower builders who strive to deliver a truly seamless multi-rollup, multi-chain user experience. And we're doing this by abstracting, simplifying the complexities of zk EVMs and the zk VMs, and making it possible for those builders to focus on the front-end user interface and user experience. Our very short-term goal is to empower the rising of a true decentralized Binance or a decentralized FTX. As good as user experience, as good as these centralized platforms, as good as cheap as these centralized platforms, as intuitive as these centralized platforms, while self-custodial and secured by zk SNARKs. I think we're good. Oh, yeah. You have a question?
Yeah. So with that, what are the biggest things we consider is about mass adoption? And recently, we were really considering if the Web3 sector needs to respect the existing audience if we're trying to chase a bunch of people that we don't have in the hope of like investing more than 1 billion people. Are the people who we have now really taking care of us? Okay, Web3 is something that I can properly believe in rather than just seeing it as for financial gain. So I want to know, like, as you guys run the companies, what do you feel is the road to mass adoption? Is it actually looking forward to the next billion people? Or is it kind of like keeping it on the gate there and just accepting that this thing is difficult and hard and maybe reward you for taking the time to invest all that energy into it?
maybe I can try it. I mean, I think there is potentially a false dichotomy there. So if you can figure out some solution that allowed the reduction of barriers to entry, I think you almost all the time should try to pursue them. So an example is account abstraction. So account abstraction is something that was, I mean, Vitalik I think proposed it for 5 years ago. Some of the original EAPs, maybe not for 337. So 337 is a little bit younger, but it has not been introduced in Ethereum, not because lack of general agreement that that's a good idea, but mostly because of like friction and difficulties in changing and fear of changing a very, very complex protocol that already secures a gigantic amount of money. So I think, if we manage to figure out a solution that doesn't make you to choose, I would say the best answer would be you focus on both with almost the same energy. Of course, you focus on the people that are here now, and you make sure that, and this is always true, if you're early in any space that then grows, you naturally benefit disproportionately. So the people that are part of this ecosystem now will be naturally taken care of. And I would argue in a way that is much, much better if this ecosystem extends to 5 billion people, rather than if this ecosystem stays for 1 million. So it's potentially a false dichotomy. Of course, if you have to choose, then, maybe my answer will change, but I would argue that at least with in zkSync, at least what we think is everything starts with the user. So we want to bring, most of all, we want to bring the freedom that comes with being able to collaborate on chain to everybody. And this must be scalable, but also must be accessible. So the other big piece is all the things around user experience, which is central around account abstraction, but there's a lot of other stuff that needs to be done.
I want to answer from two perspectives. Actually, I think we still need some foundation for this mass adoption. One of the foundation is that we still need a lot of more Web2 developers, not just solid one. So as Upchon, the co-founder of Upchon mentioned, they're compiling different language to WebAssembly, but it's pretty similar to zkEVM. Actually, it can support a lot of different language compiled to MIPS, and then we can do the proof. So I would say we should keep an eye on a broader developer community, not just Web3. And the second point actually is that for the use case side, it's not just the current DeFi, GameFi stuff. There are a lot of combination can be made between the IoT or machine learning or cloud computing and the blockchain. And I would say with the combination of this kind of technology, the mass adoption might come from here.
Yeah, I kind of agree that it's like we can have a little bit of both, and that it's beneficial to support these early users, and that also them supporting us is going to be beneficial for them in the long term as their ecosystem grows. And one thing I naturally think about all the time at Taiko, which is a little bit unique because we don't have like a sequencer, we just are like a based rollup, is that there's all this MEV that just as an example, all this MEV that users can come and capture if they learn about this kind of based rollup system. So by giving them education on these things and telling them all like the real alpha, like even trying to share code snippets and really dive deep into the architecture of how they can build these things, I think we give our community a chance to start some of these processes and be early on these new markets that will emerge. And I think everyone here agrees that we're trying to like decentralize and offload more to the community to some degree, whether that's like other like protocols and lab groups, or if it's just individual people. But I think there's gonna be more and more opportunity, whether it comes from prover pools and things like that, and trying to like aggregate proofs, or if it's something like in block proposing and extracting MEV. I think there's gonna be more opportunities for people who are like early on in these rollup ecosystems. So yeah, I think it's a win-win for both.
Talk about mass adoption. Although this has not been seen yet on zk EVMs or layer 2s. But buildings of users, probably we're still too early to talk about buildings of users adoption. We can simply imagine if we go back to 2021, we see like millions of users of step N happening just on one of the layer 2s. Are we able to handle that? Would there be a traffic problem or congestion? That is why I think it is very important to think about layer 3s and also app chains to have dedicated throughput and high performance layer 3s for certain types of applications that aims to serve millions of users, real users. And I think that is also, it's one of our methodologies. This is one of our methodologies to how to enable mass adoption in terms of millions of users to onboard on DeFi products. When you think about, you have to make it usable, and user experience has to be great. When you have millions of users trading on one platform, it's crazy. The amount of throughput you need is crazy. The amount of computation is crazy, especially if you do that with zk proofs.
Yeah, I want to respond to the answer, but I don't think the guy just went. But I don't think we want or we are able right now to onboard the next billion users. I think like we're extremely early on infrastructure. Just look at AA. It's probably one of the biggest shots. Like we are literally like building, Pimlico, Biconomy, SDK are being built right now. I mean, look at game infrastructure providers. MetaMask SDK has been shipped 1 year ago, and we're still speaking about like a great and efficient mobile onboarding. There is a lot of like challenges, and if we're not nailing down right now those infrastructure needs for builders that are actually like deploying dApps and building this kind of efficient way for onboarding users, then we can actually be counterproductive, having tons of and we see that already with a lot of like Web 2 developers coming in the space, advanced Web 2 developers coming in the space and then going back because they say, yeah, there is not enough good documentation. I don't want to say it's great. It's a great culture and collaborative cultures, but the tooling around is very early. So I'm just going back and staying another 4 or 5 years in AWS and then coming back if they see something is getting better. So I think it's a trade-off, and I think like we don't want right now this big adoption happening. We just need to concentrate on basic needs. Similar to like deploying dApps on layer 2, we saw that even in this hackathon, right? A lot of people had problem deploying their dApps, and I mentioned that before. And faucets had problems. It's kind of like a journey at the end.
And can I add one more word on this? I think as an industry, we have been a little bit used to, two things. One, we think that what we do is an end as of itself. So what we do is very important, which it is. We're all, but I think we have to start to think about it as a mean to an end, because most of the user over the next, say, 20 years will think about it in this way. I think someone said before the analogy with the browser, which I think is very apt. What we want is something like the lock in the browser that just says that what you're doing is using some backend on chain, but the front end, and to be honest, Web 2 is great. So one of the things that we suffer from is that we have a lot of Web 2 things that pretend to be Web 3, like FTX, where people are still asking me, what's the consequences? I'm like, well, if any, that's positive, because it's proving that doing an exchange in a traditional way just doesn't work. It's subject to the same traditional frauds and the same traditional failures from regulator to catch them going, lunches and dinners with these people. No, so it doesn't very work. But what works is the opposite. What we should be doing is Web 3 stuff that is camouflaged by Web 2, because the Web 2 UX is so much better than the one we are offering today. And the other bits are to say the same thing in another way is very often when you speak with Web 3 developers, there's this, it's not explicit because the culture is actually very nice, much better than in many other places, but there is a little bit of if they don't get it, they're idiots. While we should be changing it in if they don't get it, we are idiots. I think that would be a much better approach, because it will propel us forward, as a group. And we need to get to a place where a billion users may want to come. Totally agree with you already.
I think when we think about kind of trade-offs when it comes to which subset of any certain type of solidity before. We're trying to take a perspective of projecting ourselves, looking back from 10 years on. So what will we need to make, what are the choices that will most kind of benefit and further help us towards the future? And I think the point that we often always settle on is that we need to optimize developer experience. And I don't think that can be really said enough because essentially developer experience benefits existing developers and future developers unilaterally. I think there is a lot of conversations about enabling more languages for smart contract development and getting more people engaged in that sense. But I think that is it's a super interesting concept. But I think as of today, it's still really hard to tell whether it's easier to learn solidity or think about kind of the addressable market versus like the use case that kind of dApps are super specific to at this particular point in time. So I think there are a ton of interesting design problems still ahead of us, and we're looking forward to kind of staying the course and figuring these things out for the next few years.